So a little intro about myself. I'm from Bolivia. I pretty much grew up there, and I'm living now in Chicago. For no one outside of Chicago knows the flag, but that's a Chicago flag, and it has probably one of the few states that has their own flag that even the local people know. Other ones they don't even know it. Um, I'm not a typical software engineer. I actually did economics and statistics. Now more data science, but I also do a lot of data engineering and infrastructure for it. I'm a big fan of tech meetups and events. That's kind of why I'm here myself and for the community. And that was on PyCon 2023, US, Pittsburgh. And so some random question, does anyone know the name of the current keyboard, like the layout? QWERTY, yeah. But the actual history of QWERTY, it's pretty old at this point. It's tied to the typewriter, and this is the first commercial typewriter, which looks probably harder than any keyboard that we're going to be looking down the line because it has a lot of different layers. And this was by Carlos Lighting and Scholl in 1860s. And it was actually a wooden box, but if you see on the back, you can see the mechanical parts like the typical typewriter. But this one has significantly way more layers. And it looks more like a piano keyboard than an actual computer keyboard. This is how it looked, the wooden box itself. And you can see that the typing was done inverse at the bottom in the flat part on top. But going back to a more normal looking typewriter, this is from 1926, so it's almost 100 years old. And you can see the mechanical keys on top, and this was a portable one. That's kind of why it has like a box on top. But if we take a closer look, if the keys are pretty much familiar to what we're probably using right now on our laptops. This is today's modern keyboard. I'm not sponsored by Logitech or anything like that. I just chose this one for the sake that the keys are round. And if you look them like next to each other, pretty much 100 years apart, they both look almost exactly the same. You probably add the function row and the navigation, but everything else is the same. Like we didn't even have like monitors then, let alone computers or quantum computers or LLMs or anything, and yet we're still keeping such layout. So this is the modern full-size keyboard. Probably no laptops have it, but if you have a desktop keyboard, you could use this one. If you have a lot of like number navigation, a lot of people prefer to have the numpad. But let's see what we can change to probably make it more optimal. So let's go into the rabbit hole, how many changes we can do. And all the images and sources will be on my GitHub, and I'll post it on LinkedIn. So this is the full-size keyboard again. There is different parts of it. We see the number row, the function keys, the numpad, the navigation cluster, and the arrow keys. But we can start actually removing some keys, and you probably already do in your laptop because most laptops, again, don't have the numpad. So this is the TKL, and this one pretty much just removes the numpad itself. So most desktop keyboards look like this. And then we can keep going down the rabbit hole. This is a 75% keyboard, and it slightly shifts the navigation. And this is what most laptops look nowadays. Some of them have like the Vessel keyboard, which is like slightly separated, so it's easier to navigate with a tactile function, versus being everything like the top one. And then we can keep going. Then on this one, we're removing like the function keys, and like a lot of laptops also have it. And if you have like pretty much your phone, if you hold like then you start introducing the layers, and we already use a lot of layers. If you use any function to increase the light or dim of your computer, as well as volume, you're already using it, as well as any special characters. You use either Shift, Alt, or Control. This is 60, so it's pretty much the same, just without the arrow keys. And a lot of gamers already use the ASDW for moving around, so that's kind of proof that the arrow keys are not always necessary. And then we can keep going to 40%. So this one introduced, as you can see on the sides, more function keys, and you can see the colors on this one. That's why I chose this one of what each key does. But then it turns to the point of like, is it enough? Like how far can we go, and is it worth it? So that's not enough because we can keep making changes. The current keyboard is also row staggered. It has like slightly diagonal shift on the row, and it kind of makes sense for the left hand, but it doesn't for the right because fingers move up and down. However, the row stagger makes sense for the left. Again, the right is like the opposite side. So even if you put it on the proper home row, yeah, this would not be ideal. So even if you discard everything and just keep the ortholinear, it's already better for your fingers. And this one starts to introduce a bit more of like thumb keys, which we'll talk later on. And again, ortholinear applies to everything. You don't have to go to the smallest keyboard to start using the ortholinear. You can still have a full size and be ortholinear, so you don't have to commit to all or nothing. Then if you go ortholinear and small, there's a new issue, which is the wrist position can be very painful if you type for long times because it's very compact. So now we're starting to implement a new option, which is splitting keyboard. And the idea of the splitting the keyboard is that you can have it at your shoulder level. You can have your coffee, your cat, everything in between. Anything you want, your charger. Just be careful with spilling the coffee. And the good thing is that it can be the shoulder. It's more comfortable. This one is wireless. That one uses a different software than the wire ones. Again, you can tilt it to the hand position. So even though it's ortholinear, now you can actually tilt it to the proper way of the hand movement itself. The good thing of this one, and actually on this one, it starts changing. This is also ortholinear, but then the changes are more vertical. I personally have a super small pinky, and it's crazy that nowadays we use pinky for pretty much all the functions or control or layers. And this is the reason why changing the levels of the keys vertically makes more sense because our fingers are not the same length. And also the thumb, which is the strongest finger in the hand, is only used for spacebar and not only one thumb, both thumbs. And it's kind of a waste of the whole thumb for just that. So then that's kind of why you start seeing all the navigation and the functions on the thumb. You can have the control or enter or shift or any command that you want on the thumb. And the thumb starts, you can go crazy with the thumb. I prefer to keep it for 3, like this one. And that way you can navigate more easily. And then you can make them fancy. This is wireless, and it also has like display screens. And this one has the query layout, so you don't have to change the layout itself. But then you can go crazy with the keycaps. There is some crazy artwork and crazy expensive ones as well. And this one starts to be a bit trickier because the commercial ones, if you do these ones, are crazy expensive if you buy like that. So that's kind of why this is the same but wired, and this one has encoders. And the good thing with the displays, actually, if you're new to them, is that you can see which layer you're navigating. If you have a big one, it's not that relevant, but if you have like the corner, like the 40% one, it starts to be very helpful because you can see if you're in the function key and the number in navigation or number key. This one has the numbers, so that doesn't apply, but that's more for the corn. And again, the encoders could be for volume, light. So that's why I was saying that they're very expensive if you buy them, but you can build them. This is the Lily 58. That's an open source one. Some companies do sell the PCB, but you can order and make the PCB. You can order the PCB. I would recommend that first versus designing it. And there is a bunch of layouts of the open source one, and you can see what fits your hand or what's comfortable to you. Because again, there's so many different options where like just the thumb keys are slightly different. Because they're all open source, they're very tailored to their own needs. And that's the good thing about it. And even if you find something that you like and you want to change it, we're going to talk about it later. This is just the PCB itself. And this one is a through hole one. So you pretty much put all the key and components for every hole. That's why it looks kind of like crazy amount of holes. And these are all the parts that you will pretty much do it. It has like, I'm not sure if anyone has worked with electronics, but it has like pretty much the holes for the diodes, the hot swap sockets are recommended. You can pretty much put the keys directly there, but if you ever want to change it to any different type of key, mechanical key, you can do it to like go clicky or linear or any option. The TRS jacket on mine is wired, so I chose that one, but there is the wireless ones, as well as the connecting it to everything, the USB-C, and then we also have like optional things like adding the reset button if you want to reconfigure or flash it. And at the end of the day, you can add, of course, LEDs like any keyboard crazy fanatic. And the idea of this is that it's pretty much working. This is the building guide that I just showed. That's the Lily 58. I have a slightly pivoted version of that one. But that one has like super details about it, about how to solder everything and put the pieces together. And there's a lot of Discord channels that has help. Even like if you go to this one, it's like Chris Cables has their own Discord channel. So if you run into any issues throughout the way, you can ask, and there's always people helping. And they have different models and different options that you can go through it. Again, that's the one I just showed. But I found I'm building one guide, but that's one of the most helpful guides I've found overall for keywords, even if you don't opt in for that layout. But then, as any programming, once you find something online, you gotta transfer it to what are you trying to use it, and make it useful for yourself. And how it all works at the end of the day, it's just pretty much an Arduino. It's a Pro Micro. You can use the RP20, 2040, and they both work the same way. Um, Again, this is more like a close look of the keyboard, and I do recommend to do the sockets for the Arduino, so in case something goes wrong, you can easily replace it. Or even if you stop using that keyboard, you can reuse that Arduino for something else. Um, you can even insert the like super small batteries in between the socket and the Pro Micro and make it wireless, and they last about like a day or two if you have no display. With display, and if it's OLED, I would recommend not to have the battery, or unless you have a very big button at the bottom. This one has the OLED, but there is also there is one that is like a paper ink, like Kindle, that one's super efficient for battery. Now we're gonna talk about actually the like building the layout. And this one is, I found this page super helpful because like it kind of shows all the stats of how any layout that you choose. Like if you choose QWERTY, you can see pretty much all its stats and the benefits of it. The second most known one is the Dvorak, which is from 1930s. So that one was a 12-year elaborate research in English, actually. You have the vowels and punctuation on the left hand, and that makes the navigation easier, and you can see the efficiency and effort are highly better than like in the normal QWERTY. Then you have other way more options. The current one I'm using is like Comac, which is a deviation of Comac, which is the second, like Comac, I think Comac DH is probably the third one most common. But of course, all of these ones would take time to learn. And even if you want to go and customize it to any language, I found this page, which I have the QR here. Oh, here. I was talking about layout. So yeah, this is the Dvorak. It's against the 1930s, so there's actually some typewriters that already have it, and most phones, even iPhones, have the option for the Dvorak. I haven't met a single person that uses it on the phone or tablet. I think it's only computers. That would be a whole different level, but you have the option to do it. It limits more to random layouts, and that got mixed up. But this is the efficiency of the Dvorak, and you want to stick to the home row, and that's kind of why it's more efficient. This is a heat map of the keys that you use the most in English, and that's kind of why the Dvorak is based that way, and this is the Dvorak layout itself. That's the slide I already saw, and this is the other one that I like a lot because you can just drag and drop and see for any language the efficiency of it. And on this one, like this is like, for example, well, Italian, of course, you can see that it might not be the best layout, and it does change accordingly. But the good thing about it is that if you want to change it to the Dvorak to test it, it's like a drag and drop, and the stats refresh according to the language. So that's why I found this one helpful. So now that we're doing all this, how we get it to the keyboard that we made, you gotta flash it. The QMK is the option for the wired one, and you connect it with the RRS, which is, it looks almost exactly like the audio cable. It just has the 3 lines instead of 2. And you will flash it, and again, like if you do the open source why you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so many options. Like if we look at the corn again. And this one you can see, and this one you can also customize it here and drag and drop the keys, and you can see the different layers and what they do. Now, you will download it and flash it, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, you can also do it actually on any editor. I'm sorry, but this one is not on Python. You can do it on C or JSON. And here is the one that I currently use. I actually have the option to use the Hallmark, which is the layout that I preferred. And the QWERTY and different layers. So the comments are more for my own sanity to review what I'm doing and keep track of it, because otherwise the changes can be crazy. And this is the QWERTY, and this is the Hallmark. So you can see some differences on them. And you can see that the function keys at the bottom are different, and we're starting to make the most of using the thumb. This one here is actually the encoder. It's not a key in this case, and that's why it's showing that one. So if you want to design it from scratch and not use an open source one, you can do it on Python. There is actually GDS Factory. I found it very hard once you start not making symmetric figures. Like you could probably get away by making something like this. This one has an encoder and 6 keys. Like even if you want to do a full keyboard but be ortholinear or like symmetric, it's pretty straightforward. And you can see these ones on the back, still see the Arduino and everything. But once you start to make like the keyboards we saw, I found it very inefficient. So I kind of pivot from that one, but you can use KitKat. It's an open source. It's great, and I haven't found any issues. Like fortunately, I was able to use Fusion with AutoCAD, and I wouldn't say it's more easy to navigate, but I don't think it's drastically better. And that one is like significantly more expensive, like any AutoCAD. And so now that we're happy with the layout, we gotta pretty much learn how to type again, because that's a whole new journey. And there's a lot of different sites that we can use that, and they allow pretty much for you to choose the layout that you want to play with. These ones are very good for query layouts, even if you want to increase your speed. And these ones are more that you can tailor to more indie layouts. Like the main ones are there, but if you want to kind of make your own again, I found this more helpful. However, we can actually make it on Python and do the testing on Python itself. So let me see if I have it open. Hopefully it works. And on this one, we're using Pygame. Let's see if we can. And what I actually did for this one is I selected a folder, and based on the commands that I use in that folder the most, is going to give me the words. So it's not only making me practice, it's making me practice to, actually it's not this one. This is more a general one, sorry. I can go the other one. But of course typing, oh, I just missed the percentage and speed. But let's look at the one that matters more, which is this one, because you can actually see that the commands are based pretty much on the code on this folder, which they're not going to be like normal English words, so you can choose it to tailor to anything. And let's just do 4 words for. So clearly this is no longer typical practice. Hopefully, there you go. So and you can change it however you want it. You can base it on the GitHub and extract it and use those words. And at the end of the day, you're making everything more relevant to your own experience and what you type the most. These are the libraries that are used among those. They're not just used for these, they're very helpful for pretty much any random pop-up that you want to play with. So there is still a lot more that we're not talking about. Like pretty much all keyboard fanatics are it's very polarized about like keyboard switches. If you want to go linear, tactile, clicky, even the keycaps again, all the artwork on it. But changes take time. So I put this here because like if anyone has ever like done like straight razor, it's not the easiest transition, but that's once you're good at it, that's why barbers prefer it, because it's more detailed and they got used to it. Now, if you're in a rush and you have a lot of work to do, probably it's not the best idea to be making all these experiments on your own. And that's why I chose that one. So not fully convinced, you can start by making small changes. You can use the increasing speed sites just to whichever language or keyboard layout you have and do it that way. There is also, again, you can just do the ortho and or the ergonomic layouts, as well as like changing the layers and playing around to having shortcuts yourself. So maybe then you can like start to soldier yourself one of them. You can send them to PCBWay, like the design, and they'll print it pretty cheaply, or you can also get it from the sites like the one I show on the guide. And then maybe start playing with changing the layout once you started based on something like the sites I showed. So if, you know, and even if you want more, again, I'll focus less on the keyboard switches and keycaps, at least myself, but a lot of people, that's the reason they love their own keyboard. So of course, feel free. Again, these are more random products that they're already helpful and you don't have to go crazy on it. I used to have this one similar like this one for like 4 years, and I really love it because it very much forced me to use the hands the right way of using the left and right for each key. This is actually Lex Friedman's keyboard, Kinesis, but that's what I'm saying. This one's like about $400 versus if you make something, it's gonna be like closer to 100. It's still not cheap. It's like 100, 150 depending. And this is one that my friend made actually. And the benefit of it is that he has a trackball on it. And even though all of this might sound like just like spoil, I want to make my own, it's very helpful if there is some conditions that, like at some point I did fracture my shoulder. So like going back and forth from the mouse was a pain. So having something like this is ideal. So it's not just necessarily something that, oh, I want to be more efficient. You can tailor to whatever you need at the end of the day. And if you thought this was crazy, then of course there is even more options that it's a whole rabbit hole, like I mentioned at the beginning. I would say like join your local keyboard. Again, that's why the only reason I show the Chicago flag, because I did join them, and like all the Discord, there is also a lot of people that have passed through this, and they're always happy to help. And even if you wanna trade or work with anyone in person, it's always helpful. So yeah, I would just say that the conclusion is actually from a YouTube video that I watched, is the tools we use are not always the result delivered design for optimal efficiency, but rather the outcome of historical process and practical necessities, which is pretty much why QWERTY is where we use it. It's just a legacy, and pretty much people don't question it and just defaulted to keep using it, even though it was meant to prevent jamming and reduce the keys that go together, like the letters that go together, to be next to the keys. But we just kept that idea. So thank you.
Thank you again. No question on Slido, but I don't know if there are questions from the audience. Oh, okay. One question?
That, I would say, depends on the laptop. If you're using Linux, it's way easier than if you're using Windows or Mac, because sometimes again, like you depend on the software, like the iOS itself. So you could do it. The only thing that it can start to be tricky is not confusing yourself with the keys that you already have there. So as long as you get past that, it's fine, yeah. And that's like some of them have it like built in. Like if you go into the settings and look for the keyboard itself, you can change it there, and that applies to phones too. So exactly, you cannot default to whatever computer you're using, like the Vorak like example in that case. So that's the good. Also, that's the good thing about using a Pro Micro, is that no matter what computer you plug it in, you can have any shortcuts or layers. It's always gonna work because it's doing its own. So that's something that I found very helpful. Because if I also recommend to not change the layout on your laptop. I did change it on the split keyboard, so that if I'm ever working on a laptop or someone else's laptop, I'm still functional. I don't want to be taking forever to be writing or like be fully inefficient at the end of the day. So that's a good point actually, because that way the brain remembers that the split keyboard is different than the normal keyboard. Otherwise, it's very hard to separate.
Any other question?
Yes, but again, this is like the one I made. I changed it to QWERTY in case anyone wants to test it. And I live in the US and I brought it here. It's pretty compact and portable. I like the case that you can steal some of the switches on the back. And again, this is the wire version. I changed it to QWERTY because the layout I showed is not that one. This is one of the pages that I just downloaded. And it of course has all the fancy lights on whoever built this one. But I don't like that display on the default of this one that I download from the QMK. Doesn't use the display because it would be useful to see the layers on the display, like I mentioned. But I can plug this to my work computer, my Mac, and it always works. So you can have one at home and one in the office, which is what I do. I just leave the one in the office there and have this one. This is the office one because it's more compact than the one at home. And that way you can always use it. And the only thing that I would recommend against, if you work with anything on IT that you always gotta be on someone else's laptop, like fixing something, then of course not. That's probably not ideal. And like I mentioned before, it's not like you have to do all or nothing. You can take small steps and change the layout, change the keyboard, make it ergonomic, just make it ortho. Like you don't have to do all or nothing, and that's what I like about it. No, that's what I was saying, like to the previous question, like I still have my laptop fully normal QWERTY. And that's kind of why I only use weird layouts on these ones, because at least for my brain it was easier to adapt to that one. And yet still, that's why I mean my typing skill on the live test wasn't anywhere optimal because I can still do it, but it's not ideal anymore. Yeah, wireless, it's CMK, if I can spell. Uh, Yeah, so you would approach it with CMK, which would be this one, and it's pretty much the same process because you can use like the nice tools like I showed, but the editor one transfers equally to both. You just need like the flashing way to be slightly different. And again, if you want to use like a e-ink display or OLED, those things get changed in the config file, and you pretty much make a zip folder and drop it to the Arduino, and that will take care of it. That's why I recommend adding the reset button. If you ever like, I just changed this one before, like 2 weeks ago for a different talk, so that people can use it the QWERTY way and not like my weird layout if they want to test it. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And once you have it on the computer, it's pretty much connected, reset, kind of like flashing, like adding a file to a USB-C.
Okay, we still have a couple of minutes for some more question, if anyone have. Okay.
Is there a chance that you build your own keyboard and that will cause more injury to your wrist than regular ones?
Yes, that's why I show the example of the very tight ortho. Sorry, almost there. This one. This cannot be good for the wrist. Might be good for being portable and still having your own shortcuts or custom layout, but I don't think it could be good for wrist by any means.
I was also thinking to split layout keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
If you build them, I don't know, with a size that does not fit exactly your hands and fingers, you can cause yourself strain by reaching
Yes.
the keys.
There is
I
this.
saw people struggle.
No, there is this site. I didn't put in the slides, but what I did is like it has like the layouts, like just like a print version of this. No need of the inside or anything, and you can print all of them and see what fits better for your hands, which is what I did. Because this, like I mentioned, is a deviation of the Lily 58, but like I mentioned, I have the shorter pinky. That's why these two rows are shorter, like lower than the Lily 58, which is another popular layout. And it was by printing them and like playing with a paper and what makes sense to my hands. So I would recommend that, and I also recommend buying like a cheap soldering kit if you're gonna make it yourself, because you don't want to buy or order a PCB and be waiting for it to arrive, and once it arrives, it's your first time soldering and ruining it. So I would recommend buying a $5 cheap soldering PCB board, and it usually comes with big and small parts, and that way if something goes wrong, it's not catastrophic as like if you do this, because I did a different layout keyboard the first time and it went wrong, and undoing is way harder than doing it right the first time.
Okay. No, sorry, no more time for question, but you can follow up after the talk. So
Yeah, feel
thank
free
you
to
very
find
much.
me after anywhere.
Okay, thank you very much.